there can be no conversation about Seagull without the Seagull covers.
The Seagull covers.
The
Yes.
Seagull, yeah. I think that's something that most people get astonished by, really, because that's the first thing. Like even before the book arrives, you see the covers and you order it somewhere, or you see the book, and this is something that really interests me, the bookmaking process. How is it that there's such an astonishing visual range when it comes to the covers? So could you tell us a little bit about?
There's I mean, you can roughly divide it into two phases, both untrained, right? Which is when I started it, I was the automatic, I mean, I taught myself to design. Before I did that, when we actually started, there was a wonderful designer called Oshit Pal, who used to work for the Anandabazar group. He did a book for us, our first book, in fact, called Woodcut Prints of 19th Century Calcutta. And when Oshit moved on, I had watched and learnt, and we had conversed enough in the days before computer, when you artworked by sticking and pasting typeface. I taught myself to do that. And then almost 18 years ago, this young person called Shunandani Banerjee, who was hired as an assistant editor. And her only encounter before that with publishing was a 2-weekend course that Shomik Dai and Kalyani Di and Sudeshna had conducted. And I had talked into doing a little design module. And then when we needed something, I think Sudeshna said this was a bright kid, asked her to come, to join. And this was a person who didn't know computer. She sat before those little Apple Macs and was too embarrassed to ask about how to blow up the font and things. And slowly blossomed into a translator of Mahashwata's, a editor of some excellence, and started to tinker. I used to see over her shoulder designing stuff. Again, she couldn't draw, playing with typeface. I started to give her stuff, theatre quarterlies, whatever. And the next thing you know, I noticed a sensibility that was, first of all, streets ahead of mine. I mean, this is not like some... it was true, because there was reading.
Right.
There was reading which grew. There's the Seagull reading, which is 50 books a year of every single thing that screws up your mind in the nicest possible way. There's all our other reading, which is very eclectic, from crime to you name it. And there is the technology. She was so, so she sort of grew into this whole computer thing that she often talks about. And she bucks the trend that for UK you need to have a certain cover, for USA you need to have a certain...
Right.
Our covers are produced once as our books, they go across sensibility, there's appreciation. The sense of aesthetics, as far as Seagull is concerned, came out of a personal aesthetics that I grew into. There was the theatre, there was an ability to move into a space and create something. So all that was there. Luckily in her, that too was something that she imbibed in the nicest possible way and took it to a whole different level. But it's a tough act because she is both the senior editor. So you're working with your team on 50 books a year. You're also designing those 50 covers and our catalogs and so on and so forth. But again, it's been, for her, a practice that has grown over 17 years and continues to evolve and things like that. I never have an answer for the aesthetic thing. That is an instinctive thing. My sense is that we tend to kind of, I suppose, also have a little bit of an interest in the inside of the book, thanks to Shalandari. How does type breathe? Do you want to leave more margins, or are you going to try and fit things in because your brief is to cut down 40 pages? So we're a little kind of, should we say, flamboyant about that part of it too. It's not just book covers.
Right.
It's the total thing. It's the back of the book, the side of the book. It's a kind of thing. And it's a very individual practice. But the other thing she's done is all your 4 or 5 editors actually set the inside of the books.
Okay.
Which sometimes confuses, go back to the Anjum comment about how the world looks at you. Is your editor is editing, therefore you're getting familiar as editor with the text or the translation. You're therefore designing, whether it's poetry or fiction or non-fiction or something academic or a performance script, with that editorial sensibility into not a template. It becomes a template later if you do enough of those books. You're seeing it through to production. So when you have insider-outsiders, by which I mean, say, friends from Chicago University come and do classes, and they get attracted to this way of being, suddenly notice that there are no Excel sheets, There's no structures, but each editor knows that their 10 books are landing up in Chicago warehouse through this whole process of design, setting, printing, freighting. So, it's a structure. It looks on itself like it's not organized. But I think it's a method that works for us.
Right. Just before we wrap, I'd just like you to talk a little bit about two things that you sent me from the daily notes that you write. You say that target readers out there is a myth. And there's another thing that you say later, you don't make beautiful books, they exist.
I mean, to me, it's okay. So it has something to do with the fact that both as an individual and now as a group of people that work together, we're all very free with our ideas. Sometimes, being human, you sometimes, it's like often my colleagues would tell me, why are you telling Shruti? I mean, he's going to go and do this thing. It's such a brilliant idea. And I say, it exists. I'm just pulling it out of the air in a certain kind of way because it's popped into my head. And he is the person who is at that moment responding or being excited or asking me questions. So it's like now you're asking me questions. I don't have a pre-rehearsed thing except my own life. So my sense is that you have to share things totally, in fact, completely without inhibition. It's up to the other person. If they think you're an idiot, eccentric, or vulnerable, they have to figure out whether they want to nurture it or squish it. What they do with your ideas is their own sense of aesthetic and ability and so on. So for me, the books exist in that sort of way, in a kind of rarefied, the designs exist, the aesthetic exists. You have to choose. That first line, what is the first line?
Target readers out there is a myth.
That is totally a myth because every time somebody claims that they know what you're going to read, it doesn't make any sense to me. My point is, you have to know what you wish to publish. In my case, there is a wish list of responding to a certain kind of literature of the human condition, as I call it, which is a vast topic. Anything that affects you and me as a human being, politically, socially, just the poetry of it. Then there'll be enough people out there. I cannot possibly, think about it. How am I going to know your so-called emotional truth that if I do this, then pop, I know what he wants. So a certain kind of market research, perhaps it's not a textbook thing. Here you're dealing with lives of people, literature or cinema, which is also literature translated in a certain way. You're talking of, translation as an act of, untold stories. So it's not something, so in that context, I may have said that I just find it's waste of energy when somebody tells me, have you done your research? Who are your target readers? Who is wanting to read German literature in India? I'll tell you who's reading German and French and Italian, small town India. When I say small town India, I always think of Butter Chicken Ludhiana and Pankaj Mishra's book. It's the metros aren't reading enough of those.
Right.
Because there aren't enough outlets for the damn books to get there. Right. More recently, yes, because we switched our distribution to Pan Macmillan, and they're very excited with this world literature, which is being made available again. They have, and now there's a critical mass of 500-600 books that I can share with people and we subsidize them. You have a $25 book, and you have it for 500 rupees here. Right. And my reports from distributors show Bhopal and Chandigarh, and it's such a pleasure to see some strange people. Reading them.
And these people have existed. It's not like
they've existed in my time, Shomikda's time. We were always very eclectic readers as a thing.
Since this is my final question, this series is on independent publishing. So how and I've got several different answers from different people on what they think their independence comes from, like as an independent publisher. What is independent publishing for you?
Good Lord, I've never thought about it in that sense. Though I have written on it. That's the other irony. I think it's really the freedom to do right by what your instinct is about making your book as a writer available as a midwife, as a conduit, without interference of any other consideration, either marketplace or boards that select or peer reviews or any. To me, it is really, now some people dismiss that, you're an owner publisher. So I pay the price, no? Right, you're a first-time writer. I just love what you've done. So there'll be at least 600 people out there doing it. So it's really a kind of spirit which doesn't rule out the mathematics. Because if I'm talking to you about the possibility of doing your book, which involves certain travel to Ladakh, for example, so I'm quickly done a mental math, which is also, in all fairness, sometimes cheating, because I'm desperately wanting to do this book with such a fantastic idea. So I tailor the math in my head often, which is fine, because I don't know, because any math I do will not be reaching a target audience kind of theory, right? So it is the fact that you are very comfortable with a certain decision making that you do, which a certain kind of corporate publishing will not allow you.
Okay.
Right? You're not dictated always by concerns of the marketplace. That doesn't make you small or big. I mean, the irony is that, I mean, if you have a conversation with Shomikda, he will say, but Seagull is an independent multinational, because my books say London, Calcutta, New York. But the irony of that is that you've actually twisted the concept of the multinational here by saying, I will publish anything and anywhere in the world. I can add Berlin and Paris and whatever I wish to, because I'm available everywhere. But the act of creation is happening in Bhawanipur in Calcutta. Right? So these are personal choices. That is important. So often we find we're a little lonely because there aren't enough precedents to fall back on. But there's always good minds to fall back on. When we set up the Seagull London idea, for example, and we shared it with the Tariq Alis of the Gayatri Spivak, so they loved the idea and they put articulation to it. That is their task, right? Both in terms of guidance and approval or disapproval or articulation. Our task as publishers is to make it possible.
And you have been making it possible for a very long time.
We continue as long as we can. Yes, it's going to be, this is 36 years. And it takes time. It takes time for the market to find you.
Right, but I'm sure the market will come and find you if you produce the kind of books that you produce.
Well, yeah, I think if you persist with anything, it creates a kind of mass that you cannot ignore. So, yeah, but it's such pleasure.
Absolutely, and my pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for your time, Naveen Kishore.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching. Please make sure that you look up some of the other interviews that we've done as part of this series, and make sure that you subscribe to our channel. Thank you very much.